Good morning, students. Hope you're all doing well. Today we'll begin a new chapter known as King, Farmers and Towns. During the period 600 BCE to 600 CE, that is, it spans a period of 1 millennium, that is 1000 years. So, if you break down the title of this theme itself, kings will represent the political history of during this period. Farmers and towns will represent the economic history during this period. So we'll be studying in this chapter political and economic history exclusively of this period. Now social history we'll study it in the next chapter, so don't worry about that. But right now we'll only concentrate on the political and economic history. This is also known as the second phase of urbanization, which was the first phase, the chapter that we just read or we just completed. The Harappan civilization, especially the mature culture, represented the first phase of urbanization in India. Whereas this period which we are going to talk about, that is the rise of Mahajanpads and then the moving on with the Mauryan Empire, that will be the second phase of urbanization. So let us now look into detail about this topic. Okay. With the end of Harappan civilization, a new age dawns in India. Okay, this is known as the Vedic age, where a group of people or a group of tribes known as the Aryans, called the Aryans, in technical terms, it means nobles. So Aryans migrated from Central Asia and they established themselves within the Indian subcontinent. This is the most accepted and plausible theory till now. So these Aryans or the Vedic people had their own culture, and the entire lifespan of this culture, we'll call it the Vedic period or the Vedic age. Now during this period something very momentous happened. That is, for the first time the Vedas were composed. Okay, now the Veda, especially the one which is attributed a great honor, that is a front runner among all the Vedas, was the Rig Ved. Ved means knowledge. So in Rig Ved, basically hymns worshipping gods were written down or composed. Composed. Just make sure that you understand the difference between composed and written. Keep this clearly in your mind that Rig Veda was composed during this period, but it was not written down. So whatever hymns were composed during this period, praising God and asking for bountiful blessings, these hymns were passed down from one generation of another to another of Vedic people by the way of memorizing these hymns. This is known as Shruti or Smriti. Now, what the Vedic age can be divided into two periods, the early Vedic age and the later Vedic age. The early Vedic age were the people who were the pastoralists. They settled along Indus and its tributaries, and these were the people who were initially governed. They lived in tribes and they were governed by a person who was known as Rajan. This is the earliest form of a king that we can visualize or think of. So this Rajan used to protect his people with the help of other officials who accompanied him. Then during the later Vedic age, these people, the Aryans, or you can say, they transformed themselves into agricultural based community. From pastoralism they shifted to agricultural based settled communities, and they settled down in the valleys and plains of Ganga. Okay, so this is all you need to know, that right after Harappan civilization we have a new culture that came in India, but since this was not entirely an urban setup, we'll not be dealing with it. But you just need to keep this in mind, that these people are the one who composed the Vedas, which were then later written down, and these people came up with the rudimentary idea of a Rajan or a king who used to protect his people. Again, do keep this in your mind, that agricultural communities not only existed only in the Indus tributaries or in the Gangetic plains, but all these communities were in fact widespread in the Indian subcontinent, but we'll not be dealing with all of them. Why? Because they had not evolved themselves into an urban culture. So we'll not focus on that. We just leave them, but we'll acknowledge the fact that agricultural communities or settlements existed all throughout the subcontinent, whether it's the north or the south or the Deccan, whichever path you want to whichever path you can think of, you will place agricultural communities as well as pastoralists existing side by side throughout the Indian subcontinent. Now, for the first time, we'll be looking into the cultures of South India, what existed in South India, rather than overtly focusing on north or northwestern part of India. So, in South India, there was something known as megalithic culture. Now, which part of India we'll designate as South India? As South India, the Deccan Plateau and the regions beyond it till the tip of Kanyakumari. So, you have a lot of cultures existing throughout this region, but most of these cultures practiced a similar form of burial, where whenever the dead were buried, a huge tombstone, you can say, not only a single tombstone but a lot of stones were arranged in a way, you can say in a geometrical pattern, to mark the dead. So it's not that these huge stone structures were randomly arranged. No, it was given a proper arrangement. Think of it, it could either be circular, these huge megalith means what? Mega means huge or large, lith means stones. So these huge boulders or huge stones were erected in a way which would conform to a geometrical pattern, or they would be built in the form of chambers. Okay, so in this culture, in this megalithic culture, the dead were buried along with their tools. Now, one of the most important tools that we get from these graves are the iron tools, which then again gives us the evidence of the use of iron during this period in southern part of India. Now, iron had already been discovered or found during the later Vedic period. You can just give it an age like 1000 BCE. Iron was discovered in India, a roundabout figure. So once iron was discovered, it was, you can say, carved or modified into iron tools which could be used during agriculture. Now keep this in mind, whenever a new metal is discovered or a new technology comes into place, right after that you will see a huge leap in urbanization. Okay, you don't say right after that, within a span of few hundred years, you can say, think of, or depending upon what kind of pace that development is happening. For example, with the discovery of bronze, you had Harappan civilization coming into existence. Same way, with the discovery of iron, we'll begin the second phase of urbanization in India, that is the rise of Mahajanpads. Now, this rise will not happen immediately or automatically as soon as that metal is being discovered. Now, why is that? Once the metal is discovered, the process of obtaining that metal or refining that metal comes into place. Then later on, you need time to establish a distributive network, so that whatever iron is being produced in one place in the iron, when it is excavated from iron mines and then it is smelted, it can be distributed throughout the area. So that distribution network takes time. So once the metal develops, then comes the next phase of urbanization. Next, we have the evidence of early kingdoms, empires, or you can say city states springing up in throughout the Indian subcontinent. So once that is established, once a political authority is established, you can say it is easier for a lot of other changes to take place. Remember, in the Harappan civilization, we already said because they had a centrally planned authority, they could give directions about where the settlements will be placed, and they would even take decisions regarding trading with other cultures or communities. Same way, even in the second phase of urbanization, once a political authority was established, it was easier to bring in another chain of developments. That was, new towns could be built. Okay, agricultural production could be given a lot more emphasis, or it could be given a lot of impetus by giving them means the farmers, by giving them a lot of means to organize production. Next, we have the evidence sources for this period. Okay, so you have a rich variety of sources available for this period. We have both archaeological sources, that is the artifacts, and we have both the literary sources. Okay, that means the written text. So what are the sources? Just make sure you make a note of it. We have the inscriptions which were usually written on rocks or pillars. Okay, then you have text. Remember, we already spoke about the Vedic text. Though it was not written, it was composed, but still it spoke about this period and the changes taking place during this period. Not only the Vedic text, you had a lot of other texts, the Dharma Sutras, the Dharma Shastras, a lot more text. And not only text from Indian authors, you'll even have evidence of text from foreigners coming into India. We'll talk about one such text, that is Megasthenes, who came to India, who was an ambassador of a Greek ruler, Seleucus. So he wrote the text known as Indica. So this is very important source of information for this period. Then you have coins. So coins are very important. Why? Because for the first time we are breaking from the clutches of barter trade and developing a system of coinage and currency. Okay, so say bye bye to barter age. Now we are coming into the new age of coins and the visual material, including the art and craft produced during this period. Okay, so with this we come to an end of the introduction for this topic. Let's begin with a new topic now. So okay, Friendship and Piyadasi. Even the title is very poetic. It's like the artist and his great craft work that he found. So who was Friendship and who was Piyadasi? Friendship, or James Friendship, was an officer in the Mint of East India Company. ये ध्यान में रखना, we are talking about the phase before 1850s. So in history, that time period in India is attributed to the rule of East India Company. After 1857, we'll say India was ruled by the British Crown or the British Queen. So since we are talking about development before 1830s, so he was an officer in the Mint. Mint कहाँ होता है? Mint मतलब क्या होता है? जहाँ coin mint हो रहा है, जैसे okay. So आज भी India, I'm sorry, even today we have a lot of places where minting of coins take place in India. Not many, I think 4 or 5. So just short homework for you. Google these 4 places where the coins that we use, 1 rupee coin, 2 rupee coin and 5 rupee coins, where they are produced in India. It's just for your general knowledge. Okay, back to the topic. So he was an officer in the mint. Obviously, if you're working with the coins and if you have an ingenious mind, you will naturally be drawn to it. So he started studying these, not only the coins that were being produced, but it developed an inquisitive nature in him, and he started studying coins of ancient period. Okay, he was already fascinated with Indian history. He used to to further the cause of Indian people, he used to bring or write about all the developments of science that were taking place in Europe, so that the Indians were aware. He used to translate it. So he was very much pro-Indian, you can say, in his stance. So this James Friendship was also the mentor of a very important person we have already studied in the last class, who was called Alexander Cunningham. Okay, so who carried forward his work later on. So what happened? James Princip had a lot of interest in coins, or what you call, he was a numismatist. So it is through the study of ancient Indian coins that Princip was able to decipher two very important scripts which were used during that period in inscriptions. Which are the two of these scripts that we'll look into? They are known as Brahmi and Kharoshti. Okay? So before we talk about that, just let me get establish something कि what is the difference between language and script. बस एक एग्जाम्पल लेके ये याद रखना, हिंदी लैंग्वेज है, ठीक है, जिस लैंग्वेज हम लोग बोलते हैं, अगर सपोज दैट इज़ हिंदी, बट उसकी जो स्क्रिप्ट है और जो लिपि है जो हम लोग उसको लिखते हैं उसको हम लोग देवनागरी स्क्रिप्ट बोलते हैं. सेम वे उस टाइम का लैंग्वेज था, बोलचाल वाली जो भाषा थी, दैट वॉज प्राकृत for mostly official purpose. It was a little tough language for normal people or common people. The layman used to speak Pali or many other languages. Here, let's not go into that. So this Prakrit was the language and it was written down in various scripts. Brahmi and Kharoshti were the two main scripts which were used. So Brahmi was used basically in central India, central part of India, you can say North India and central India. And Kharoshti was the script which was used in the northwestern part of India, that is the Gandhara region. So what did James Princip find? So Princip, while looking into and studying these coins from the Gandhara region of that time, he found out that on the front side of the coin, that is called the obverse side, in any coin or currency, it's a technical term that is used. The front side is known as obverse, the back side is known as reverse. So on the front side of the coin, you had a script written in Greek language, okay, whatever they were conveying, whatever they wanted to convey, basically praising the ruler. That coin had a script written in the Greek language on the obverse side, but on the reverse side they had the same thing written in Kharoshti script. तो लिंक लैंग्वेज मिल गया खरोश्ती और ग्रीक के बीच में. ग्रीक वॉज नॉट अ डेड लैंग्वेज एट दैट टाइम, इट्स स्टिल नॉट अ डेड लैंग्वेज. सो ही न्यू ग्रीक, so he was able to he was able to correlate Greek letters with the Kharoshti script. So that is how the translation worked, क्योंकि एक लिंक लैंग्वेज और की लैंग्वेज मिल गया था जो सेम चीज़ इधर भी बोल रहा है और उधर भी बोल रहा है. यही चीज़ we did not find in the Harappan civilization. That is why we are not able to decipher it, because Harappan script के आगे पीछे कुछ नहीं लिखा हुआ है, मतलब no other language. So that is why, that is one of the reasons. Okay, coming back to James Princip. So once he deciphered this script, he found out that in inscriptions, okay, inscriptions जो rock pillars पे होते हैं, rocks पे होते हैं या pillars पे होते हैं, so in these inscriptions very often the word Piyadasi was mentioned. Okay, Piyadasi, Piya मतलब प्रिय word से लिया हुआ. So Piyadasi means pleasant to behold, pleasant to look at. So this Piyadasi was later correlated with the Mauryan king Ashok. In some other inscriptions he was termed as Ashok. So then it was correlated, ठीक है, Piyadasi is Ashok. So once this discovery was made, it was announced in the 1830s, and this is very important discovery. Okay, that's why it's written in your book. It was the most momentous development in Indian epigraphy. In epigraphy means study of inscriptions. So there will be some tiny little boxes which are given in your book which might not come for your evaluation, but these are very important for you to understand this topic further. Don't leave any boxes, read them. Okay. Now, as a result of this discovery, this finding of these scripts, and later on the interpreting of these inscriptions, it gave a new direction to Indian and European scholars. Why is that? For the first time, it became easier for them to reconstruct the lineages of major dynasties that had ruled in India during that time. Okay, so it was for the first time they were able to construct a political history. Now, why is this very important, especially during this time? It was the time period of 19th century. These findings that there was a ruler, there were a group of dynasties that had ruled India previously and who were so powerful that they even managed to keep Alexander the Great at bay, gave Indian people a sense of renewed vigor. उन लोग के nationalist movement, the later on nationalist movement जो carry forward होगा 19th century and then later on 20th century, it imbued them with a new self-confidence. That is why not only for historical point of view this discovery was important, but even the implications this discovery had was very important. Then again, scholars being scholars, they could not just remain themselves, or they could just not only talk about the political history. They started looking into or investigated into new connections or links or issues, whether these political changes, once the kings established their stronghold, were they able to further economic and social development. That became the focus of their study. Okay, so with this we'll come to an end of this topic. Make sure you read this part along with all the uh, pink boxes and the green boxes, whatever that is given, that is in your text. You need to read it, okay, and do your assignment on time. Just a quick reminder, I came to know that a lot of you are not listening to the class and you're not thinking that you will be able to do it on your own. I know you all are intelligent enough, but that's not the point. Whatever facts that are given in the book, in order to actually make that somewhat reasonable, you need to listen to the lectures of teacher. Okay, so make it a point to be regular in your studies, listen to all the lectures, don't miss it, because we'll not be doing these chapters once again whenever the schools reopens. So make sure that you listen to all the video lectures, not only mine, all the other teachers too. Be regular. It is